This is a story that seems simple, but hides a secret that few can discover. Can you find the hidden keyword in it? Comment your answer, subscribe, and prepare yourself for more stories full of mysteries. Margaret never imagined she would reach that point. At 62 years old, she held only an old suitcase and a heavy heart. The house where she had lived for 30 years had been sold to pay the debts her husband left when he died. Cancer took Robert in 6 months. The medical bills took everything else in even less time. Charleston, South Carolina, shone under the April sun. The historic streets, colonial mansions, perfumed gardens, everything seemed to mock her misery. Margaret looked at the address written on a crumpled paper. 1247 Magnolia Street. Eleanor Whitmore, a wealthy widow looking for companionship. Margaret answered the ad out of desperation, not by choice. The mansion was imposing. 3 floors of white brick, Greek columns, wide verandas. Margaret climbed the steps with trembling legs, not from exhaustion, from shame. The door opened before she knocked. An elegant woman, gray hair pulled back in a bun, penetrating blue eyes, appeared. "You must be Margaret." "Yes, ma'am." "Come in, and stop calling me ma'am. My name is Eleanor." The interior was even more impressive. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, antique furniture that told stories of generations. Margaret felt even smaller. Eleanor led her to a sitting room. Tea was already served. "I'll be direct," said Eleanor, sitting with impeccable posture. "I don't need a maid. I have people who clean and cook. I need someone who is here, someone who converses, who dines with me, who makes this house less empty." Margaret swallowed hard. "I understand. I lost my husband 3 years ago. My children live far away. This house has 23 rooms, and no voice but mine." Eleanor poured the tea. "You lost your husband recently? 8 months ago? Then you know what it is. The silence that screams." Margaret nodded, feeling her eyes burn. "You'll have your meals with me. You'll have your own room on the 2nd floor. I'm not an employer, Margaret. I'm just a woman who doesn't want to die alone in a cold palace." That night, Margaret lay in a bed with linen sheets that smelled of lavender. She cried, from gratitude, from humiliation, from fear of the future. She didn't know that this house held something that would change everything. The first days were strange. Margaret woke early, had coffee with Eleanor, then wandered through the house like a polite ghost. She didn't know exactly what her role was. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a maid. She was something in between. Eleanor had rigid routines. Morning walks in the garden, reading in the library from 10 to noon, lunch always punctually at 1 in the afternoon, calls to children who rarely returned her calls. Margaret observed everything, and she noticed the loneliness that Eleanor tried to hide beneath her elegance. "Do you know how to play chess?" Eleanor asked on the 5th night. "It's been years since I played." "Good. I hate winning easily." They played until midnight. Margaret won 2 games. Eleanor smiled for the first time. "You're good at this." "My father taught me. He said chess teaches you to see beyond the obvious." "Your father was wise." The weeks passed. Margaret began to feel less out of place. She helped Eleanor organize correspondence, accompanied her to social commitments, listened to her stories about her late husband, Thomas, a respected lawyer who collected art. The art. The house was full of it. Paintings on the walls, sculptures in the hallways, framed photographs on every surface. "Thomas loved buying pieces at auctions," Eleanor explained, as they walked through the 2nd-floor gallery. "He said art is the only thing that appreciates both financially and emotionally." Margaret stopped before a large painting, a maritime landscape, nothing exceptional at first glance. Waves breaking on rocks, stormy sky, earthy colors. "This is interesting," said Margaret, moving closer. "That one? It's just a landscape I inherited from my Aunt Beatrice. She bought it at an estate sale in the 1960s. I never liked it much, but Thomas insisted on hanging it in the library. He said it had character." Margaret tilted her head. There was something there, something her trained eye caught for an instant. But Eleanor was already moving forward, talking about other pieces. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. The image of the maritime painting floated in her mind. Something was wrong, or was too right. Before marrying and dedicating herself to her family, Margaret had worked for 5 years at the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston. She was a curatorial assistant. She learned to read paintings the way other people read books. And that landscape had something her professional instinct recognized. She got up, went downstairs silently. The library was dark, lit only by the moon entering through the tall windows. Margaret turned on the desk lamp and looked at the painting. Yes, it was there, a detail that no one had noticed. Now tell me, are you beginning to see what Margaret sees? The keyword is closer than you imagine. Did you notice something strange? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you're ready to unravel more of this mystery, subscribe to the channel and keep binge watching. Margaret approached the painting. Her eyes traveled over every inch of the canvas. The brush stroke technique, the composition, the use of light and shadow. It wasn't an amateur work. Definitely not. She grabbed a chair and climbed up to examine the lower right corner. There, almost imperceptible, were marks. Not exactly a clear signature. More like initials disguised in the texture of the rocks. Her heart raced. "What are you doing?" Margaret almost fell off the chair. Eleanor was at the door, in a robe, with a confused expression. Sorry, I couldn't sleep and... You were admiring the ugliest painting in the house in the middle of the night? Margaret climbed down from the chair, embarrassed. Eleanor, can I ask you a question? Do you know who painted this? I have no idea. As I said, it was bought by my aunt at an estate sale. It came without documentation. Why? Margaret hesitated. She didn't want to create false expectations. Maybe she was seeing things that didn't exist. Desperation sometimes makes the mind play tricks. It's just that before I married, I worked with art at the Gibbs Museum, and this painting has interesting characteristics. Eleanor crossed her arms. Interesting how? The technique, the style. It reminds me of the work of some early 20th century painters. I need to verify some things before I say more. Do you think it's worth something? I don't know, but I think it deserves a more careful investigation. Eleanor studied Margaret for a long moment, then sighed. You know, Thomas always said that painting had something special. I thought it was just his stubbornness. But maybe he saw what I didn't see. Can I research a little? It doesn't cost anything. You can. But Margaret, yes? Don't get your hopes up. Sometimes things are just what they seem. An old landscape bought for $50 in 1967. But Margaret already knew it wasn't. In the following days, she spent hours in the library researching in art history books that Thomas had collected. Eleanor allowed her to take photos of the painting to examine better. Margaret made notes, comparisons. She remembered classes, exhibitions she had helped organize, conversations with experienced curators. And the more she investigated, the more her suspicions were confirmed. The painting had all the characteristics of a specific artist. An American painter who worked on the East Coast between 1905 and 1920. His works were rare, many had been lost, some were never found, and the art market paid fortunes for them. But Margaret needed more than suspicions, she needed proof. Eleanor, she said during Friday dinner, I need to tell you something. Eleanor put her fork on the table. You discovered something. Maybe, but I need your permission to do something. What? I need to show photos of the painting to a specialist. Someone who can confirm or rule out my suspicions. And if it's something valuable, Margaret looked directly into Eleanor's eyes. Then it will be yours. It always was. I just want to help you discover the truth. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then nodded. All right, but do it discreetly. I don't want my children to know until we're sure of something. Why? Because if there's money involved, they'll appear like vultures. The bitterness in Eleanor's voice hurt Margaret. She knew that pain well. The pain of discovering that people only care when there's something to gain. That night, Margaret sent emails to 2 old contacts from the museum. She attached detailed photos, explained the situation vaguely, and waited. Margaret, it's been so long. The photos you sent are intriguing. The brushstroke technique, the treatment of light. This has all the marks of William Ashford Bennett, but without seeing the piece personally and examining the canvas, I can't confirm. Bennett is known for hiding his initials in creative ways in his works. Have you checked the lower right corner? He used to integrate the letters WAB into the landscape itself. If you can get a macro photo of that area, I can give you a more informed opinion." Margaret read the email 3 times. Her hands trembled. William Ashford Bennett, one of the most underrated American painters of the early 20th century. His works, when authenticated, were worth between $2 and $5 million. Many were in museums. Others, lost. She ran to the library. Eleanor was there, reading a novel. "Eleanor, I need to examine the painting more closely, with a magnifying glass. Do you have one?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Thomas had one, in the desk drawer." "What did you discover?" "I don't know yet, but I need to verify something specific." Margaret found the magnifying glass. She approached the painting with reverence. Under adequate light, she began to examine the lower right corner, where the dark rocks met the sea foam, and then she saw it, in the textures of the stones painted with mastery, forming a natural part of the composition, the letters W, A, and B. So subtle they seemed like accidents of the landscape, but they were there, perfectly integrated, the hidden signature of William Ashford Bennett. "My God," Margaret whispered. "What?" Eleanor approached. "What did you see?" Margaret pointed. "Here, see these shapes in the rocks? They're not random, they're letters, W-A-B. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "I'm not seeing anything but stones." "Exactly. It's intentional. The artist hid his mark in the very scenes he painted. It was like a game, a puzzle for those who knew to look. And these letters mean—" Margaret took a deep breath. "William Ashford Bennett, an American painter who worked in the early 20th century. His works are extremely rare and valuable." Eleanor's face paled. "Valuable how?" "Millions, Eleanor. We're talking about millions of dollars." The silence in the library was absolute. Even the antique clock seemed to stop ticking. "Are you sure?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice barely a thread. "Not completely. I need official authentication. But all the signs are here. The technique, the style, the hidden signature, everything corresponds to Bennett's method." Eleanor sat heavily in an armchair. "My aunt bought this for practically nothing. It hung in this house for decades. Thomas looked at it thousands of times. And none of you knew what you really had. How did you see this? How did you notice something that went unnoticed for so long?" Margaret looked at the painting. "Because I learned to read between the lines of art, to see beyond the obvious. My work at the museum taught me that the greatest treasures don't always shout their importance. Sometimes they whisper, and you need to be quiet enough to hear." Eleanor closed her eyes. "What do we do now? We need a professional authenticator, someone specialized in Bennett. I know someone in New York, Dr. Catherine Morse. She's the greatest living authority on Bennett's works. And if it's real, then your life changes completely." "Our life," Eleanor corrected, looking at Margaret. "You found this. You saw what was hidden." "Eleanor, no discussion. If this painting is worth what you say, you deserve part of it. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for destiny. Maybe Thomas always knew there was something special about it. Maybe you were brought here exactly for this." Margaret felt tears burning. "First, let's confirm, then we'll talk about it." That night, she sent macro photos to Martin and asked for Dr. Morse's contact. Martin's response came quick and excited. "Margaret, this could be authentic. Contact Catherine immediately. If it's real, you found a lost work by Bennett. This is historic." The word was there, hidden in the rocks, waiting decades to be seen. Dr. Catherine Morse responded the next day. Her email was formal, but Margaret could feel the interest between the lines. "Mrs. Coleman, the photographs you sent are extremely intriguing. The integration of the initials into the composition is consistent with Bennett's known method. However, I will need to examine the work personally to make a definitive authentication. This will include pigment analysis, examination of the canvas and frame, and comparison with cataloged works. I can be in Charleston next week. Please maintain absolute discretion about this possible discovery until we have definitive conclusions." Margaret showed the email to Eleanor during breakfast. "She's coming here?" Eleanor seemed nervous. "This is real, isn't it? It really could be." "It could. But Eleanor, we need to be prepared for any result. It might not be authentic. It could be a copy, a tribute, a forgery. But you don't believe that." "No," Margaret admitted. "My instinct says it's real." The following days were tense. Eleanor could barely look at the painting without feeling a mixture of hope and fear. Margaret revisited all her books about Bennett, memorizing details of his life and work. William Ashford Bennett was born in 1878 in Portland, Maine. He studied in Europe, returned to the United States, and spent years painting the Atlantic coast. He was known for his reclusiveness and his unique method of signing works, hiding his initials in the very scenes he created. He died in 1926 at 48, under mysterious circumstances. Some sources said suicide, others accident. His catalog of works was incomplete. Many paintings had been sold directly to private collectors and were never seen again. He painted puzzles, Margaret said to Eleanor while they dined. Each work had layers of meaning. The hidden signature was just the beginning. He believed that true art should be discovered, not just seen. How do you know so much about him? I organized a small exhibition about American coastal painters at the museum. Bennett was one of the artists I researched. At the time, I never imagined I would see one of his works up close, much less discover one. On Thursday, the doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. Margaret answered. A woman in her early 50s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, thin-framed glasses and a leather briefcase in hand, stood at the door. Mrs. Coleman? I'm Catherine Morse. Margaret felt her stomach tighten. Dr. Morse, please come in. Eleanor awaited them in the library. Introductions were brief and polite, but everyone there knew this wasn't a moment for social pleasantries. Dr. Morse placed her briefcase on the table and looked at the painting hanging on the wall. She remained silent for a long minute. May I remove it from the wall? She finally asked. Of course, Eleanor responded, her voice tense. Margaret helped Dr. Morse carefully take down the painting. They placed it on the table under the natural light from the window. The specialist pulled out a jeweler's loupe, a portable UV flashlight, and a small digital microscope from her briefcase. She began the meticulous examination. Margaret and Eleanor watched in silence. Every second felt like an eternity. Dr. Morse examined the surface, the corners, the back of the canvas, the frame. She took macro photographs with her phone, made notes in a notebook. After 30 minutes, she straightened her back and looked at the two women. I'll need to take some paint scrapings for laboratory analysis, and I also need to remove the canvas from the frame to examine markings and stamps. This may take a few days. But? Eleanor could barely breathe. But everything I see here is consistent with an authentic work by William Ashford Bennett. The integrated signature, the brushstroke technique, the frame style, even the type of canvas corresponds to what Bennett used at that time. Margaret felt her legs weaken. She was right. If my laboratory analysis confirms, Dr. Morse continued, you have here a lost work by Bennett, and given the quality and condition, one of the most significant ever discovered. How much? Eleanor swallowed hard. How much could something like this be worth? Dr. Morse adjusted her glasses. Conservatively, between $3 and $5 million at auction. But a discovery of this magnitude, a lost work that resurfaces after decades, could go far beyond that. The silence in the library was deafening. Margaret looked at Eleanor. She saw tears streaming down the face of the woman who had taken her in when she had nothing. And she realized that everything was about to change. The investigation reached its crucial moment. Have you discovered what the key word is yet? It's being revealed in every detail of Margaret's journey. Pay attention. Dr. Morse took the painting for analysis. Eleanor and Margaret spent a week in emotional suspension. They barely ate. They barely slept. They talked in circles about what they would do if it were authentic, then censored themselves for counting on something uncertain. Eleanor's children called that week, as they always did once a month, quick superficial conversations. Eleanor didn't mention anything about the painting. Not yet, she told Margaret. When we know for sure. The following Wednesday, Dr. Morse called. Can you be sitting down? She asked. Eleanor put it on speakerphone. Her hands trembled so much that Margaret had to hold the phone. The analysis is complete. We examined the composition of the pigments, the canvas materials, the wood fibers of the frame. Everything dates consistently from the period between 1910 and 1920. More importantly, we found a property mark on the back of the canvas, partially covered by old restorations. It's a stamp from a gallery in Rockport, Massachusetts, that we know sold Bennett's works directly in 1915. And, Eleanor could barely speak, it's authentic. You have a legitimate William Ashford Bennett. And more, I was able to identify the work in Bennett's incomplete catalog. It's a painting called Storm Breaking, which he created in 1914, and which was believed to have been destroyed in a gallery fire in 1923. It wasn't destroyed. It was sold before the fire and simply disappeared. Margaret put her hand over her mouth. Eleanor began to cry. Do you understand what this means? Dr. Morse continued. It's not just an authentic work. It's a lost work that reappears. This is extraordinary in the art world. How much? Margaret finally managed to ask. I've already received inquiries from 3 auction houses. The conservative estimate is $4 million. But at auction, with the story behind this discovery, it could easily reach 6 or 7. The number was incomprehensible. Eleanor hung up the phone and looked at Margaret. This is real, she whispered. It really happened. It happened. Because of you. Because of your eye. Your knowledge. Eleanor, no. Let me speak. Eleanor held Margaret's hands. You came to this house with nothing. Humble. Broken. Lost. I took you in because I was alone. But you gave me something worth more than money. You saw what was hidden. You used your knowledge to change our lives. The painting was always yours, and you discovered it. Without you, it would still be just an unimportant landscape on the wall. We're going to split this equally, Margaret, 50% for each of us. I can't accept. You can and will. It's not charity. It's justice. It's recognition. And more, Eleanor smiled through her tears. It's what Thomas would have done. He always valued knowledge and integrity above all. Margaret cried. She cried for the loss she had suffered, for the humiliation she had felt, for the hope she had lost and now, miraculously, found again. Thank you, was all she could say. In the following weeks, news spread discreetly through the art world. Sotheby's offered to represent them at auction. A documentary about the discovery was proposed. Museums asked if they could display the work before the sale. And Eleanor's children, of course, appeared. Mom, we just heard about the painting. David, the oldest, called from Seattle. Why didn't you tell us? We need to discuss the legal aspects, tax implications. It's all already resolved, David. Margaret and I hired excellent lawyers. Margaret? The woman who lives there? Mom, you can't be thinking of splitting it with her. I've already decided. 50% hers. Non-negotiable. That's ridiculous. She's taking advantage of you. Eleanor hung up the phone and smiled. Funny, she said to Margaret. My children hadn't called in weeks. Now suddenly they're very concerned about my well-being. The auction was scheduled for 2 months from now. Enough time to generate anticipation, for the story of the discovery to circulate, for collectors and museums to prepare. Margaret looked at the painting, now carefully stored in a climate-controlled vault, and still couldn't believe it. A signature hidden in the rocks. 3 letters integrated into the landscape. That's what changed everything. The night of the auction in New York was surrounded by glamour and anticipation. The Sotheby's room was packed. Millionaire collectors, museum representatives, specialized journalists. Everyone wanted to see and own Storm Breaking, the lost painting by William Ashford Bennett. Margaret wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress that Eleanor insisted on buying for her. Eleanor was stunning in a cream suit. The two sat together in the front row, fingers intertwined. Nervous? Eleanor whispered. Terrified? Me too. The auctioneer, a distinguished man in a bow tie, approached the podium. Behind him, projected on a giant screen, was the image of Storm Breaking, the painting that spent decades hidden in a library in Charleston. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer began, it's an honor to present Lot 47 tonight, an extraordinary discovery that has captured the imagination of the art world. Storm Breaking by William Ashford Bennett, 1914. A work believed lost forever, rediscovered by an attentive and knowledgeable eye. He told the story briefly. The aunt who bought it at an estate sale. The decades on the wall. Margaret, the woman who saw what no one else saw. The authentication is incontestable, he continued. The pigments, the canvas, the frame, all date from the correct period. And most importantly, The image on the screen changed to a close-up of the lower right corner of the painting. Bennett's characteristic signature masterfully integrated into the composition. The initials WAB, hidden in the very rocks he painted. Margaret looked at the screen. There it was, the secret that changed everything, the signature that remained invisible for so long. "We'll begin bidding at $2.5 million. Paddles began to rise immediately. The competition was quick and fierce. 3 million, 3.5, 4. Margaret could barely breathe. 4.5 million, 5. The competition narrowed to 3 bidders. An impeccably dressed Asian man, a blonde woman on the phone with someone, and a representative from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. 5.5, 6. Eleanor squeezed Margaret's hand so hard it hurt. 6.5 million. The Asian man hesitated, lowered his paddle. The blonde woman continued. 6,800,000, the auctioneer announced. The Metropolitan representative raised his paddle. $7 million. The entire room held its breath. The blonde woman spoke on the phone for long seconds, then shook her head negatively. $7 million, the auctioneer repeated. Once, twice, the gavel struck. Sold to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for $7 million. The room exploded in applause. Margaret couldn't process it. 7 million, divided in 2, 3.5 million each. Eleanor was crying and laughing at the same time. "We did it! My God, Margaret, we did it!" After the auction, there was a reception. Journalists wanted to interview Margaret. How did she discover it? What made her look closer? "I learned to pay attention," she said simply, "to see beyond the surface, to look for what's hidden." A New York Times journalist asked, "What are you going to do now with that amount?" Margaret looked at Eleanor, who was smiling beside her. "I'm going to rebuild my life. I'm going to invest in art education for people who, like me, love art but don't have resources. And I'm going to remember that sometimes, when you lose everything, you're just being prepared to find something much greater." Dr. Catherine Morse approached with a glass of champagne. "Mrs. Coleman, congratulations. You made a discovery that will go down in art history. Bennett's signature hidden in the rocks. It's poetic. He always said his works were puzzles waiting to be solved, and you solved one of them." That night, at the hotel, Margaret and Eleanor toasted in the suite they shared. "To knowledge," Eleanor said. "To friendship," Margaret responded. "And to hidden signatures that change lives." Margaret smiled. The signature. That's what started everything. 3 letters integrated into the rocks. WAB. The secret Bennett hid that no one saw for decades, until someone with a trained eye finally paid attention. "You know what's funny?" Margaret said. "If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have gone to live with you, never would have seen that painting, never would have looked close enough to see the hidden signature. Sometimes," Eleanor reflected, "we need to lose everything to find what really matters." And what really matters? It's not the money. It's knowing we're still capable of seeing beauty where others see only surfaces. It's remembering that knowledge and attention are worth more than any fortune. And it's discovering that sometimes the treasure we're looking for was there all along, just waiting for the right eyes. Margaret looked out the window. New York glittered below. Her life had changed completely. But it wasn't luck. It was observation. It was knowledge. It was having the courage to trust in what she saw, even when it seemed unlikely. The signature was there. It always was. Hidden, integrated, waiting, and she found it. Now tell me, did you manage to discover what the keyword of this story is? It was present in every part of Margaret's discovery. Did you solve the puzzle? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want to see the emotional conclusion of this journey, subscribe to the channel and keep binge watching. 6 months later, Margaret stood in front of a renovated building in historic downtown Charleston. The sign on the facade gleamed under the morning sun. Coleman Whitmore Art Education Center. Eleanor was beside her, smiling. "It turned out perfect," Eleanor said. "It turned out more than perfect. It's everything I dreamed of." The center offered free classes in art history, painting techniques, and curatorship for young people from disadvantaged communities. Margaret had hired 3 excellent teachers. Enrollments for the first semester were full. "You know," Margaret said as they walked through the interior of the building, "when I lost everything, I thought my life was over, that at 62 there was nothing left for me. And now? Now I know I was just beginning a new chapter, a chapter I didn't even know existed. They stopped before a framed reproduction of Storm Breaking. It wasn't the original, that now belonged to the Metropolitan Museum, but it was a powerful reminder. Look, Margaret pointed to the lower right corner. The signature, the initials WAB integrated into the rocks. That's what changed everything. Not the painting itself, but what was hidden in it. The detail that required attention, knowledge, and patience to be seen. Eleanor touched the glass of the frame. Bennett was a genius, hiding his identity in the art itself, making the signature part of the work, not just a name scrawled in the corner. It's a perfect metaphor, Margaret reflected. Sometimes the most valuable things in life are hidden in plain sight. You just need to know where to look and have the courage to trust in what you see. A group of teenagers entered the center. They were the first students arriving for the inaugural class. Margaret greeted them with a smile. Welcome. Today we're going to talk about something fascinating. How to read art, how to see beyond the obvious, how to discover the secrets that artists hide in their works. She showed the reproduction of Storm Breaking. This painting hung on a wall for decades. Hundreds of people looked at it, but only one person really saw it. Why? Because that person had knowledge, had training, had attention to detail. One of the teenagers raised their hand. What did she see? Margaret smiled. Something hidden in the rocks. A signature. The artist's initials, so perfectly integrated into the landscape that they seemed to be part of the stones. W.A.B. William Ashford Bennett. And that made the painting valuable? No, the painting was already valuable. The signature just proved its authenticity. But here's the most important lesson. Margaret made a dramatic pause. The real value wasn't in the painting. It was in the knowledge necessary to recognize it. It was in the attention necessary to see what was hidden. It was in the courage necessary to investigate. Eleanor watched from the door, proud. After class, the two women had lunch at a nearby cafe. Are your children still angry? Margaret asked. Eleanor laughed. Oh, David and Christine, they got over it, especially after I gave each of them $50,000 as a Christmas present. Money has that magical power to heal resentments. And the rest? Invested, donated to causes that matter, and saved to ensure I can live comfortably without depending on anyone, like you. Like me, Margaret agreed. She had bought a small, charming house near the historic center. She had her own space, her independence, her restored dignity. But she dined with Eleanor at least 3 times a week. The friendship born of necessity had transformed into something genuine and lasting. Do you know what the real treasure of this story was? Eleanor asked. The painting? No, it was you, Margaret. Your knowledge, your trained eye, your ability to see what was hidden. The painting was always there. But without you, it would still be just an old landscape on a wall. Margaret felt her eyes well up. And without you, I would be lost. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You gave me dignity when I felt humiliated. We saved each other. We did. That night, Margaret was in her new house, in her small office, when she received an email from Dr. Catherine Morse. Margaret, there are rumors of another possible Bennett work that surfaced in a private collection in Virginia. The owners aren't sure of its authenticity. I mentioned your name. They would like to hire you as a consultant. Interested? Margaret smiled. Interested? She had discovered her new vocation, finding what was hidden, solving artistic puzzles, using her knowledge to reveal treasures waiting for the right eyes. She replied, completely interested. When can I start? She closed the laptop and looked out the window. Charleston sparkled under the stars. Her life had changed completely, not because she found a valuable painting, but because she never stopped using her knowledge, even when everything seemed lost, because she paid attention to details when others simply looked without seeing, and because she discovered that sometimes what saves us isn't luck, it's seeing what's hidden in plain sight. It's recognizing a signature camouflaged among the rocks. It's knowing that knowledge, attention, and perseverance are worth more than any fortune. That signature changed her life, the 3 letters hidden by Bennett, W-A-B. But the true lesson was greater. We all have hidden signatures in our lives. talents, knowledge, abilities that go unnoticed until someone, or we ourselves, finally sees them. Margaret saw, and everything changed. Now tell me, did you manage to discover what the keyword of this story is? The word that was present in every discovery, every crucial moment, every turn of this journey. The word that Bennett hid in the rocks. The word that made the painting authentic. The word that changed 2 lives. Did you discover the keyword? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you're ready for the next story with its puzzles, subscribe to the channel and keep binge watching. Thank you for staying until the end. Secret keyword, signature.